Okay, it is 1 o'clock, and I want to welcome you to Contracts 101, Part 4. Today, we're going to be discussing preparing the amendment to address concerns, commonly known as the ATAC, and the Unilateral Termination TNR. Shannon, you seem to be the only one on the call. Can you see the screen okay and see the presentation?
Yep, I sure can.
Okay, super. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
All right, so here is an example of our purchase sale agreement that we're going to be discussing today. We've highlighted some points in yellow and green, and I'm going to move on to the next slide that talks about the timelines of our contract that we're using today as an example. So day 0 is our binding agreement date. Which is March 16th. And again, this is an example. Day 2, the earnest money is due to the holder on March 18th. Day 10 is when our due diligence expires, which is March the 26th. Day 25 is when our financing and appraisal contingency expire on April 10th. And on day 40, it's our closing date. Which is April 25th. And in this example, we have a move-in date 2 days later on April the 27th. So that being said, what we have highlighted here in yellow and green, I'm going to review that with you right now. The due diligence is the right for the buyer to terminate the purchase sale agreement for any reason within the 10-day binding agreement date, which is the example here. Those dates are going to vary depending on what you negotiate in your contract. Usually, they're generally, I'll see, between 7 and 10 days. During that time, the buyer may propose any amendment, such as an amendment to address concerns, to try to get changes made to the purchase and sale agreement before the due diligence expires. But again, there is no guarantee the seller will sign and agree. So if the seller does not sign and agree to a proposed amendment that the buyer submits during the due diligence period, then the buyer is going to need to decide whether to, or not to unilaterally terminate before the due diligence expires. And all of that is highlighted here for you on the right side of the screen. And we record these, guys, so if you ever want to go back and really study it a little more in depth, feel free to do so. They are stored in Circle under Inspire Network Resources, FYI. All right, so here is our amendment to address concerns with the property. I've highlighted some things here in yellow and green for you to take a look at, and I'm going to go over those with you right now. The GAR Form 704 is the amendment to address concerns with the property, and it was created specifically to be used during the due diligence period. If this amendment is not fully accepted, executed, and a copy delivered to all parties prior to the expiration of the due diligence period, then it becomes null and void. There are little shall and shall not boxes kind of on the G in training at the top, and that means that there are termination boxes referring to any remaining days left on the due diligence period, terminating early or not, if the amendment is fully accepted and fully executed. That's going to vary from buyer to buyer, whether they want to terminate or move on. If it's a very hot property and they really want this property, it may be a nice incentive if the seller goes ahead and agrees to their amendment to address concerns. So go ahead and move on with your contract. The buyer can ask for many things during the due diligence period. It's an opportunity for them to try to ask for repairs, a price reduction, additional closing costs, or other changes in the terms of the contract while they still have the leverage of right to terminate for any reason. Oops, I'm using the wrong mouse. Sorry, guys, I got ahead of myself here. We've also added, highlighted in blue here, a special stipulation, number 302, that can be added to your amendment to address concerns to cause it to become a unilateral termination if the seller does not accept it. It's very useful to protect the buyer's earnest money. So if you're dealing with a seller who is slow to respond, or you find yourself on day 10 and it's 7 o'clock at night, and you're getting ready to present this amendment, I would go ahead. First of all, it should be presented sooner, but if you are in that situation, always add that GAR form special stipulation to protect the buyer's earnest money. And then here is our unilateral notice to terminate the purchase and sale agreement and proposed disbursement of earnest money. The two-part form. So if the buyer is either unable to get the seller to sign and agree to the proposed ATAC, or the buyer chooses to terminate rather than even proposing an ATAC, then the GAR form F522, the unilateral notice to terminate purchase and sale agreement and proposed disbursement of earnest money, needs to be signed by the buyer and delivered to the seller or their agent prior to the expiration of the due diligence period. The GAR form F522 TNR is a two-part form. The top section is unilateral, and it only has to be signed by the party, either the buyer or the seller who's terminating, and this kills the contract as soon as it's delivered. However, the bottom section of this form is an agreement, and it's regarding who will receive the earnest money and must be signed by all parties, buyers and sellers, in order for the money to be dispersed. I get questions all the time where they're like, well, Tom, the buyer never delivered the earnest money. I still want the seller to sign the bottom portion, because that language that is underneath the yellow highlighted piece on the bottom contains language that holds everybody harmless. Okay, so it's more than just earnest money. It also prevents the agents and the brokerage from any further action on anybody's part. So if the parties will not sign and agree to the disbursement of earnest money, then the holder of the money will need to follow alternate disbursement procedures, such as making a disbursement decision or filing an interpleader lawsuit. This is why we always encourage you to have your broker hold the earnest money for your client, if at all possible, because I've seen all kinds of situations, guys, arise when closing attorneys are holding earnest money. They are not governed by the Georgia Real Estate Commission. I've seen them not follow the rules of the contract. And I will tell you that, excuse me, that if we're holding it and we have to make a disbursement decision, Angie or I will make sure that it is properly given to the right party. And that's all based on a reasonable interpretation of the contract. So when you hear the word 10-day letter, that's what this is. It's a alternate disbursement procedure that we have to send out if we are holding the earnest money. Any questions about that? All right, so let's just say the contract's terminated, and then the parties decide they want to try to work it out and close. The purchase and sale agreement at that point can be brought back to life using the F290 excuse me, agreement to reinstate the contract. This document will agree that the contract is reinstated and back in full force and effect. However, it's very important to add language that was in the ATAC, if that's possible, or any other amendment that was not previously signed by the by the seller. And you can use this form as your amendment so that while you're agreeing to bring the contract back to life, you're simultaneously getting the terms, or at least some of the terms that you originally wanted. All right. That's everything for today, guys. Again, you can always reach us at broker@heartatl.com. You can call me. You can call Angie. We are here to support you. Please join us. Join me next week at 1 o'clock, and we're starting the Contracts 101 over again with part 1. Have any other questions? Let me know. If not, I will see you guys next week.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
You too.